This video is for those of you who have just finished having an affair. I know most of my videos are for the people who are standing, for the children, for the family, to tell you what to do. But this time, I wanted to talk directly to you. Because I know that you're not a bad person. Just like me, you fell down a dark hole. You made a horribly bad decision. Funny thing about infidelity is once it has you looking away and looking down this direction, you almost never look back. And I do tell my standers, the biggest difference between those whose marriages are reconciled and those who are not is that in those that were reconciled, the standing spouse was A, standing, and B, they let their prodigal know they were standing. But I remember when I left my husband in 1986 and I finished my affair in 1989-ish. I lived by myself and really got back in touch with God and was really happy bringing my life back in order. And it was at that time that I actually thought to myself, suppose I should file for divorce. I mean, I guess that's the next logical step. It is so funny that I didn't even consider reconciling with my husband. All of us that have affairs, and I'm not talking about those of you that have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're just chronic. For those of you that do that and you need help, call me. We'll see what we can do because you have to get past it. But I'm really talking about those of you who fell like me and you wondered what in the world happened. How could I have done this? I'm a good girl. I'm a good Christian. I'm a good Catholic. But we don't often look backwards if there's no contact from our spouse. And for me, that was very little because my husband and I lived in different states. I wouldn't have reconciled. I say that to this day, had my husband not come back and said, please reconcile. And he persisted. But for you, you've just finished an affair. Your mind is clear. You know you should have never done it. But you've probably not even considered going back home because you've told everybody you never loved her, you never loved him. You have been away from your spouse for 3, 4, 5, 2 years. I'd like you to consider home. I'd like you to consider going back. First of all, yeah, it's humbling. Especially if your spouse hasn't said to you, please come back. Especially if your spouse has said to you, I will never take you back. Trust me, most of us want to see humility. We just want to see that you were sorry. And calling your spouse and asking, hey, you want to talk? Want to get a cup of coffee? Can I come over? What do you want to do for the kids' birthdays? That's a good start. But I'm asking you with all the courage that you can muster from God, with all the grace, cover yourself in prayers, that you look back and consider seriously how your marriage was before the affair. I would even say most affairs don't necessarily happen because you're having a bad marriage. They happen because you accidentally stepped in that hole. And the rhetoric that follows is natural. I never really loved you. You were too controlling. You were a narcissist, whatever. We focus on all their flaws, and they did, in fact, have flaws. But scientifically, your brain doesn't allow you to go back. Oh, I made a mistake. Now that I'm done with the affair, I realize how good my spouse was. It's almost like we forget. And so I'm asking you to ponder. I'm asking you to go back to those days where you would sit home and have dinner or just sit there in front of the TV in your t-shirt and socks and whatever it is you would wear. When you would just mow the lawn, when you would just do the things that people did in a normal, healthy home. Kids would come home, sometimes they'd scream and yell, sometimes they'd have fights, but you dealt with them in your own unique way, you and your spouse, or sometimes you alone, or sometimes them alone, and those are some of the areas that you could fix. But mostly I just want you to focus on the fact that it's right. Yeah, it's awkward at first. And yeah, it's a little bit humiliating, but you humiliated your spouse. I was with another man. That was so humiliating for my husband. Yet he swallowed his pride. And he asked me to come home, knowing people would judge him for doing so. So let him judge you. Because ultimately, when you face God, he already knows you had the affair. But when he looks at you and says, glad you tried to go home. I'm proud of you. You made that mistake and you tried to rectify it. And for many of you, your spouse will take you home. Not going to say they're going to go, oh my gosh, yes, great, come home. Expect a little resistance. For crying out loud, you've just been through the most traumatic thing a marriage can go through, right? But be persistent. Be loving. Try to win your spouse's heart back again. You won his or her heart in the first place. You can do it again. It's just that big of a deal. There are souls depending on your decision. The kingdom watches you. Because wouldn't you rather when you meet God, him say, well done. Even if your spouse doesn't take you back, even if your spouse says, I don't want you back, the first 3, 4, 5, 7 times. Even if they never say they'll take you back. When God looks at you and he says, you did your best, you tried. Or if you did reconcile, he'll be even happier. Or would you rather God say, you didn't even try. First you offended your spouse, and then you left them. Though you knew that marriage was indissoluble. Again, I speak out of experience, and I'm so glad that those days for me were decades ago. The awkwardness is past. I don't even know how many people think about it. I mean, of course, if we bring it up, they'll be like, oh yeah, you guys got through that. But again, in so many videos, I say we are about to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary. 40th. And we were only married 4 years when I left him. We have had more than 3 decades of history to build together. Oh yeah, we've still had fights. But our children have long forgotten the pain of the separation. They don't even think about it, I think. And they get to have Christmas with mom and dad in the same house. They don't have to go to a stepmom and a stepdad's. They don't have to look at divided meals. Who do I call? Do I call mom? Do I call dad? Can they both walk me down the aisle? Whose table should I sit who at for weddings? You can do this. You can and should do this. And most definitely do it for your children. At this point, they may even say, I don't care, move on. I mean, you screwed it up. Mom's happier. That's because they put that wall up to protect themselves. I'll do a whole other video about how kids do that. And it doesn't matter if your kids are little or adult. They are watching you. When you go back home, their hearts will be healed. It will begin the healing process. There'll be some healing that will still need to take place. But ultimately, what they once thought was shattering their lives will take away probably the biggest pain they will ever feel. So they can start focusing on security and other areas in their life, the vocations God gave them. If your spouse is already dating someone else, make sure you let them know, I'm still here. And make sure they know how sorry you are. If you have to do it in a letter first, if you have to do it in a video, if you have to do it any way you have to do, let them know, I'm so sorry for what I did. Will you ever forgive me? I will be waiting for you for the rest of my life. And hopefully we can get past my monstrous mistake. And I have seen people leave their boyfriend or girlfriend or their impending second marriage to go back to the spouse, their covenant spouse. Because deep down they too knew that marriage is indissoluble. That even though they tried to wash the pain of your affair away and remarry someone else who was better and more right for them and more compatible with them, it wasn't a real marriage. So this is for you. I just beg you, do the right thing. Now, if you think that you want to do this, but you think your spouse will slam the door in your face and you don't know how he or she will receive it, give me a call. I'll talk to you about it, and maybe I'll intervene. I've done that. I've called the other spouse, felt them out, and then introduced the idea. I'm a bit persuasive. That's what my degree is in. I don't want to have to help 1,000 million billion people with all these things, but I will. And I don't want to make that sound like a negative thing. I'm just saying, I will give every last drop of my blood to help fight for your marriage. If you think maybe your sister can go talk to your spouse, or you have another person, an in-law, and maybe they've always allied with you and still loved you despite your mistake. Maybe talk to them. But don't give up. Don't let your mistake, don't let the pride, don't let Satan say, well, you know, I never really did love him or her. Yes, you did. Or you wouldn't have gotten in bed with them. You wouldn't have vowed to marry them forever, and you know I'm right. You loved him. And you loved him a lot. You can love him again. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon. And despite the heavy topic, please remember always to live your life sunny side up.